Good evening. This is Mara. I hope, as always, that you are comfortable while you listen to this part. I hope you've had a good day and that you can put your mind at ease while you listen to me read to you. Tonight, I'll be reading DUNE, Part 6 and 7. Part 6. Forward. UA, Wellington, Standard 10082-10191. Medical Doctor of the Sub School. Grade Standard 10112. MD, Juana Marcus. B. G. Standard 10092 through 10186. Chiefly noted as betrayer of Duke Leto treaties. Context. Bibliography. Appendix 7. Imperial conditioning and betrayal. From the Dictionary of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Although he heard Dr. Yue enter the training room, noting the different, stiff deliberation of the man's pace, Paul remained stretched out, face down, on the exercise table, where the masseuse had left him. He felt deliciously relaxed after the workout with Gurney Halleck. "You do look comfortable," said Yue in his calm, high-pitched voice. Paul raised his head, saw the man's stick figure standing several paces away, took in at a glance the wrinkled black clothing, the square block of a head with purple lips and drooping mustache, the diamond tattoo of imperial conditioning on his forehead, the long black hair caught in the school's silver ring at the left shoulder. "You'll be happy to hear we haven't time for regular lessons today," Yue said. "Your father will be along presently." Paul sat up. "However, I've arranged for you to have a film book viewer and several lessons during the crossing to Arrakis." "Oh." Paul began pulling on his clothes. He felt excitement that his father would be coming. They had spent so little time together since the Emperor's command to take over the fief of Arrakis. Yue crossed to the L table, thinking how the boy has filled out these past few months. Such a waste. Oh, such a sad waste. And he reminded himself, "I must not falter. What I do is done to be certain my Juana will no longer can't be hurt by the Harkonnen beasts." Paul joined him at the table, buttoning his jacket. "What'll I be studying on the way across?" "Ah, the tyrannic life forms of Arrakis. The planet seems to have opened its arms to certain tyrannic life forms. It's not clear how. I must seek out the planetary ecologist when we arrive, a Dr. Kynes, and offer my help in the investigation." And you thought, "What am Hewitt drummed his fingers on the table, caught Paul staring at the nervous motion, withdrew his hand. Maybe you have something on the whole Iraqi population, Paul said. Yes, to be sure, Hewitt said. There are two general separations of the people. Fremen, they are Ronku, and the others are the people of the Gravet, the Sink, and the Pan. There's some intermarriage, I'm told. The women of Pan and Sink villages prefer Fremen husbands. Their men prefer Fremen wives. They have a saying. Polish comes from the cities. Wisdom from the desert. Do you have pictures of them? I'll see what I can get you. The most interesting feature, of course, is their eyes. Total blue. No whites in them. Mutation? No. It's linked to saturation of the blood with melange. The Fremen must be brave to live at the edge of that desert. By all accounts, you have said, they compose poems to their knives. Their women are as fierce as the men. Even Fremen children are violent and dangerous. You'll not be permitted to mingle with them, I dare say. Paul stared at Yue, finding in these few glimpses of the Fremen a power of words that caught his entire attention. What a people to win as allies. And the worms? Paul asked. What? I'd like to study more about the sandworms. To be sure. I've a film book on small specimens, only 110 meters long and 22 meters in diameter. It was taken in the northern latitudes. Worms of more than 400 meters in length have been recorded by reliable witnesses, and there's reason to believe even larger ones exist. Paul glanced down at a conical projection chart of the northern Iraqi latitudes spread on the table. The desert belt and south polar regions are marked uninhabitable. Is it the worms and the storms? But any place can be made habitable, if it's economically feasible, you have said. Arrakis has many costly perils. He smoothed his drooping mustache. Your father will be here soon. Before I go, I've a gift for you. Something I came across in packing. He put an object on the table between them. Black, oblong, no larger than the end of Paul's thumb. Paul looked at it. Yue noted how the boy did not reach for it and thought, how cautious he is. It's a very old orange Catholic Bible made for space travelers. Not a film book, but actually printed on filament paper. It has its own magnifier and electrostatic charge system. He picked it up, demonstrated. The book is held closed by the charge, which forces against spring-locked covers. You press the edge, thus, and the pages you've selected repel each other, and the book opens. It's so small, but it's 1,800 pages. You press the edge, thus, and so, and the charge moves ahead one page at a time as you read. Never touch the actual page with your fingers. The filament tissue is too delicate. He closed the book, handed it to Paul. Try it. Yue watched Paul work the page adjustment, thought, I salve my own conscience. I give him the surcease of It's quite old. Let it be our secret. Your parents might think it too valuable for one so young. And Yue thought, his mother would surely wonder at my motives. Well, Paul closed the book, held it in his hand. If it's so valuable, indulge an old man's whim, Yue said. It was given to me when I was very young, and he thought I must catch his mind as well as his cupidity. Open it to 467 Kalima, where it says, "From water does all life begin." There's a slight notch on the edge of the cover to mark the place. Paul felt the cover, detected 2 notches, one shallower than the other. He pressed the shallower one, and the book spread open on his palm, its magnifier sliding into place. "Read it aloud," Yue said. Paul wet his lips with his tongue. Read, "Think you of the fact that a deaf person cannot hear? Then what deafness may we not all possess? What senses do we lack that we cannot see and cannot hear another world all around us? What is there around us that we cannot stop it?" Yue barked. Paul broke off, stared at him. Yue closed his eyes, fought to regain composure. What perversity caused the book to open at my Juana's favorite passage? He opened his eyes, saw Paul staring at him. "Is something wrong?" Paul said. "I'm sorry," you replied. "That was my dead wife's favorite passage. It's not the one I intended you to read. It brings up memories that are painful." "There are 2 notches," Paul said. "Of course," Yue thought. Juana marked her passage. His fingers are more sensitive than mine and found her mark. It was an accident, no more. "You may find the book interesting," Yue said. "It has much historical truth in it, as well as good ethical philosophy." Paul looked down at the tiny book in his palm. Such a small thing, yet it contained a mystery. Something had happened while he read from it. He had felt something stir in his terrible purpose. "Your father will be here any minute," Yue said. "Put the book away and read it at your leisure." Paul touched the edge of it as Yue had shown him. The book sealed itself. He slipped it into his tunic. For a moment, when Yue had barked at him, Paul had feared the man would demand the book's return. "I thank you for the gift, Dr. Yue," Paul said, speaking formally. "It will be our secret. If there is a gift of favor you wish from me, please do not hesitate to ask. I need for nothing," Yue said. And he thought, why do I stand here torturing myself and torturing this poor lad, though he does not know it? Oh yeah, damn those Harkonnen beasts. Why did they choose me for their abomination? End of part 6. Part 7. How do we approach the study of Muad'Dib's father? A man of surpassing warmth and surprising coldness was the Duke Leto Atreides. Yet, many facts opened the way to this Duke. His abiding love for his Bene Gesserit lady, the dreams he held for his son, the devotion with which men served him. You see him there, a man snared by destiny, a lonely glory of his son. Still, one must ask, what is the son but an extension of the father? From Muad'Dib, Family Commentaries by the Princess Hyrulon. Paul watched his father enter the training room, saw the guards take up stations outside. One of them closed the door. As always, Paul experienced a sense of presence in his father, someone totally here. The Duke was tall, olive-skinned. His thin face held harsh angles warmed only by the deep gray eyes. He wore a black working uniform with red armorial hawk crest at the breast, a silvered shield belt with the patina of much use girded his narrow waist. The Duke said, "Hard at work, son." He crossed to the L table, glanced at the papers on it, swept his gaze around the room, and back to Paul. He felt tired, filled with the ache of Naughton, showing his fatigue. I must use every opportunity to rest during the crossing to Arrakis, he thought. There will be no rest on Arrakis. Not very hard, Paul said. Everything's so... He shrugged. Yes, well, tomorrow we leave. It'll be good to get settled in our new home. Put all this upset behind. Paul nodded, suddenly overcome by memory of the Reverend Mother's word. For the father. Nothing. Father, Paul said, will Arrakis be as dangerous as everyone says? The Duke forced himself to the casual gesture, sat down on the corner of the table, and smiled. A whole pattern of conversation welled up in his mind, the kind of thing he might use to dispel the vapors in his men before a battle. The pattern froze before it could be vocalized, confronted by the single thought. This is my son. It'll be dangerous, he admitted. Hawat tells me we have a plan for the Fremen, Paul said, and he wondered, why don't I tell him what that old woman said? How did she seal my tongue? The Duke noted his son's distress, said, as always, Hawat sees the main chance. But there's much more. I see also the combined Honnet Ober Adventure Mercantiles, the Combe Company. By giving me Arrakis, His Majesty is forced to give us a Combe directorship, a subtle game. Combe controls the spice, Paul said, and Arrakis, with its spice, is our avenue into Combe. The Duke said, there is more to Combe than melange. Did the Reverend Mother warn you? Paul blurted. He clenched his fists, feeling his palms slippery with perspiration. The effort it had taken to ask that question. Hawat tells me she frightened you with warnings about Arrakis, the Duke said. Don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind. No woman wants her loved ones endangered. The hand behind those warnings was your mother's. Take this as a sign of her love for us. Does she know about the Fremen? Yes, and about much more. What? And the Duke thought. The truth could be worse than he imagines, but even dangerous facts are valuable if you've been trained to deal with them. And there's one place where nothing has been spared for my son. Dealing with dangerous facts. This must be Leavitt, though. He is young. Few products escape the comb touch. The all fades before melange. A handful of spice will buy a home on Tupil. It cannot be manufactured. It must be mined on Arrakis. It is unique, and it has true geriatric properties. And now we control it, to a certain degree. But the important thing is to consider all the houses that depend on the comb profits, and think of the enormous proportion of those profits dependent upon a single product, the spice. Imagine what would happen if something should reduce spice production. Whoever had stockpiled melange could make a killing, Paul said. Others would be out in the cold. The Duke permitted himself a moment of grim satisfaction, looking at his son and thinking how penetrating, how truly educated that observation had been. He nodded. The Harkonnens have been stockpiling for more than 20 years. They mean spice production to fail, and you to be blamed. They wish the Atreides' name to become unpopular, the Duke said. Think of the Landsrat houses that look to me for a certain amount of leadership. Their unofficial spokesman. Think how they'd react if I were responsible for a serious reduction in their income. After all, one's own profits come first. The great convention be damned. You can't let someone pauperize you. A harsh smile twisted the Duke's mouth. They'd look the other way no matter what was done to me. Even if we were attacked with atomics. Nothing that flagrant, no open defiance of the convention. But almost anything else short of that, perhaps even dusting and a bit of soil poisoning. Then why are we walking into this? Paul, the Duke frowned at his son. Knowing where the trap is, that's the first step in evading it. This is like single combat, son, only on a larger scale. A feint within a feint, within a feint, seemingly without end. The task is to unravel it, knowing that the Harkonnens stockpile melange. We ask another question. Who else is stockpiling? That's the list of our enemies. Who? Certain houses we knew weren't friendly, and some we thought friendly. We'd not consider them for the moment because there's one other much more important. Our beloved Padisha Emperor. Paul tried to swallow, and his throat suddenly dry. Couldn't you convene the Landsrat, expose, make our enemy aware we know which hand holds the knife? Ah, now, Paul. We see the knife now. Who knows where it may be shifted next? If we put this before the Landsrat, it'd only create a cloud of confusion. The Emperor would deny it. Who would gain sway? Who would gainsay him? All we'd gain is a little time while risking chaos. And where would the next attack come from? All the houses might start stockpiling spice. Our enemies have a head start. Too much of a lead to overcome. The Emperor, Paul said. That means Sardaukar. Disguised in a Harkonnen livery, no doubt, the Duke said. But the soldier fanatics nonetheless. How can Fremen help us against Sardaukar? Did Hawat talk to you about Salusa Secundus? The Emperor's prison planet? No. What if it were more than a prison planet, Paul? There's a question you never hear asked about the Imperial Corps of Sardaukar. Where do they come from? From the prison planet. They come from somewhere. But the supporting levies the Emperor demands from, that's what we're led to believe. They're just the Emperor's levies trained young and superbly. You hear an occasional muttering about the Emperor's training cadres, but the balance of our civilization remains the same. The military forces of the Landsraad great houses on one side, the Sardaukar and their supporting levies on the other, and their supporting levies pull. The Sardaukar remain the Sardaukar. But every report on Secundus says SS is a hell world. Undoubtedly. But if you were going to raise tough, strong, ferocious men, what environmental conditions would you impose on them? How could you win the loyalty of such men? There are proven ways. Play on certain knowledge of their superiority, the mistake of secret covenant, the spirit of shared suffering. It can be done. It has been done on so many worlds, in many times. Paul nodded, holding his attention on his father's face. He felt something. Revelation. He felt some revelation impending. Consider Arrakis, the Duke said. When you get outside the towns and garrison villages, it's every bit as terrible a place as Seleucia Secundus. Paul's eyes widened. The Fremen. We have there a potential of corpse as strong and deadly as the Sardaukar. It'll require patience to exploit them secretly and wealth to equip them properly. But the Fremen are there, and the spice wealth is there. You see now why we walk into Arrakis, knowing the trap is there. Don't the Harkonnens know about the Fremen? The Harkonnens sneered at the Fremen, hunted them for sport, never even bothered trying to count them. We know the Harkonnen policy with planetary populations. Spend as little as possible to maintain them. The metallic threads in the hawk symbol above his father's breast glistened as the Duke shifted his position. You see, we're negotiating with the Fremen now, Paul said. I sent a mission. Headed by Duncan, Idaho, the Duke said. A proud and ruthless man, Duncan, but fond of the truth. I think the Fremen will admire him if we're lucky. They may judge us by him. Duncan, the moral. Duncan the moral, Paul said, and Gurney the valorous. You named them well, the Duke said. And Paul thought, Gurney's one of those the Reverend Mother meant, a supporter of worlds, the valor of the brave. Gurney tells me you did well in weapons today, the Duke said. That isn't what he told me. The Duke laughed aloud. I figured Gurney to be sparse with his praise. He says you have a nicety of awareness, in his own words, of the difference between a blade's edge and its tip. Gurney says there's no artistry in killing with the tip, that it should be done with the edge. Gurney's a romantic, the Duke growled. This talk of killing suddenly disturbed him, coming from his son. I'd sooner you never had to kill, but if the need arises, you do it however you can, tip or edge. He looked up at the skylight, on which the rain was drumming. Seeing the direction of his father's stare, Paul thought of the wet skies out there, a thing never to be seen on Arrakis from all accounts. And this thought of skies put him in mind of space beyond. Are the guild ships really big? He asked. The Duke looked at him. This will be your first time off planet, he said. Yes, they're big. We'll be riding a Highliner because it's a long trip. is truly big. Its hold will tuck all our frigates and transports into a little corner. Will be just a small part of the ship's manifest, and we won't be able to leave our frigates. That's part of the price you pay for guild security. There could be Harkonnen ships right alongside us, and we'd have nothing to fear from them. The Harkonnens know better than to endanger their shipping privileges. I'm going to watch our screens and try to see a guildsman. You won't. Not even their agents ever see a guildsman. The guild's as jealous of its privacy as it is of its monopoly. Don't do anything to endanger our shipping privileges, Paul. Do you think they hide because they've mutated and don't look human anymore? Who knows? The Duke shrugged. It's a mystery we're not likely to solve. We've more immediate problems. Among them, you. Me. Your mother wanted me to be the one to tell you, son. You see, you may have Mentat capabilities. Paul stared at his father, unable to speak for a moment. Then, a Mentat. Me. But Hawat agrees, son. It's true. But I thought Mentat training had to start during infancy, and the subject couldn't be told because it might inhibit the early. He broke off, all his past circumstances coming into focus in one flashing computation. I see, he said. A day comes, the Duke said, when the potential Mentat must learn of what's being done. It may no longer be done to him. The Mentat has to share in the choice of whether to continue or abandon the training. Some can continue. Some are incapable of it. Only the potential Mentat can tell this for sure about himself. Paul rubbed his chin. All the special training from Huat and his mother, the mnemonics, the focusing of awareness, the muscle control and sharpening of sensitivities, the study of languages and nuances of voice, all of it clicked into a new kind of understanding in his mind. You'll be I'm sorry. I'm a little dehydrated. You'll be the Duke someday, son, his father said. A Mentat Duke would be formidable indeed. Can you decide now, or do you need more time? There was no hesitation in his answer. I'll go on with the training. Formidable indeed, the Duke murmured, and Paul saw the proud smile on his father's face. The smile shocked Paul. It had a skull look on the Duke's narrow features. Paul closed his eyes, feeling the terrible purpose reawaken within him. Perhaps being a Mentat is terrible purpose, he thought. But even as he focused on this thought, his new awareness denied it. End of part 7. Thank you for listening. That concludes our part of DUNE for this week. I hope you've enjoyed listening and that you'll come back to hear more next time. For now, this is Mara, signing off.